Twitter is changing the rules for their verification status. So in the past, they said that, hey, verification is just simply when you have somebody who has some recognition and the person's large enough to get impersonators. So the check mark isn't an endorsement. It just means, hey, this is the real person. You know what I mean? And it's not just for individuals. It's also for whatever corporations, businesses, you name it, whatever it is. So, hey, that makes sense. It's just saying, this person's large enough and is known enough to have impersonators. So here's the check mark letting you know this is the real one. That system to me seems like it makes perfect sense. It's just a way to tell real from fake. It's in no way an endorsement. I mean, look, by definition, it's not an endorsement. Why? Well, take, for example, you have Mitt Romney's verified and Obama's verified. They disagree on a lot of things. So it's not like Twitter saying, we agree with Mitt Romney, here's a check mark. Oh, actually, no, we agree with Obama, here's a check mark here. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, same thing. You go down the list. It's just, you have, views don't come into it. It's just, this is the person who's known, and they can be impersonated. They're big enough to be impersonated. We recognize that, so this is the real one. Here's the check mark. That's all it means, okay? Well, there are many people on Twitter who've basically misinterpreted that, and they've basically claimed and put it on Twitter that, no, this is you endorsing somebody. So, there's been examples recently of people who are openly hateful white nationalist characters, people like Richard Spencer, who I think it's even fair to go as far as to call him a neo-Nazi, because he's the one who's doing the fucking Hitler salute, and his positions are pretty fucking Nazi-esque. But there's others too, white nationalists, you name it. There are people who are genuinely hateful people who've gotten that check mark. And there's been a backlash from some who say, what are you doing? You're endorsing these, hideous worldviews. And for a while, Twitter was like, no, we're not. This is just, them being big enough to have impersonators, so we're just letting people know this is the real one. It's not an endorsement by any stretch of the imagination of their ideas. It's just saying they're big enough to have impersonators, full stop. Okay, well, now they're changing their mind and they're cracking down. Okay, so let me read you. What they're doing is they've shut down applying for verification. There was a brief period where you could apply for verification and they'd either approve it or deny it. Now they're saying, no, we're going to put a hold on that. We're going to personally go through everybody who's already been verified, and we're going to de-verify a lot of people. And let me give you some of their new, guidelines here and what can lead to de-verification. They say, intentionally misleading people on Twitter by changing one's display name or bio. Okay, right off the bat, I know somebody who's done that as a joke. Like Brandon Wardell is verified. He's a comedian. And he had done, pretended to be Kim Jong-un for, fucking 30 minutes and was just fucking around. I think he pretended to be Bill Maher, just fucking around. And yeah, he changed it immediately after, and it was no big deal at all. Everybody who follows him, no, it wasn't really them. It literally didn't sway anybody because he was trying to fuck around on purpose and trying to say ridiculous things as that other person. Okay. But they're saying now you can get de-verified for that. More. Promoting hate and or violence against or directly attacking or threatening people or threatening other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or disease. Supporting organizations or individuals that promote the above. Whoa. So that is so vague and so broad, there is a good case to be made. Everybody who's a member of the Republican Party can't be verified. I'm not exaggerating. Listen, promoting hate or violence, you could argue they promote hate, or directly attacking or threatening other people on the basis of, you could argue they attack them because they argue with them, about race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation. So if somebody's against gay marriage and they vocalize that, I would argue that's hateful. Hey, you're being hateful by saying that this person shouldn't have equal rights. Would we accept that in the realm of segregation? Like, what? No, it's just my opinion that I'm in favor of separating the races and having segregation. No, you'd say that's hateful for you to be against desegregation. So why is it not hateful to be against gay marriage? You know, is it hateful to be against interracial marriage? Everybody would say that's racist. So isn't it, of course, homophobic if you're against equal rights for gay people and gay marriage? Okay, again, going after people for sexual orientation, gender identity, supporting hate. Yeah, there's a lot of hateful people. If you support the Republican Party, I mean, Donald Trump has argued we should take out the families of terrorists, so kill civilians on purpose. He's called for torture in an unapologetic fashion. He said the Mexicans, they're rapists. I assume some are good people. He said we need a total and complete shutdown of Muslims. That's bigotry. That's hatred. I don't even think it's close. That's clearly what that shit is. By Twitter's own standard, by their own logic, shouldn't Trump be de-verified? Shouldn't every far-right person be de-verified? And not even just far-right, every right-wing person? I mean, and then they say, again, well, if you attack people for religious affiliation, you could easily view things I've said as that. Because I disagree with religion, and I'm trying to argue for more people to become non-religious. Because I think the religions are not correct. I think that they preach voodoo. I think they're basically saying, hey, worship my Jigglypuff in space, or my Sky Wizard. You know, that's what? Oh, really? A zombie Jewish carpenter walked on water and is 3 people, but he's 1 person and he's God, and there's a fucking burning bush and a talking snake and a 7-headed No! Really? Muhammad flied to heaven on a winged donkey? That's what happened? Really? You know, you go down the list. These are all, like, people could argue just based off what I said right now, I'm attacking or being hateful against people for their religious affiliation, so de-verify Kyle. So, and then they go on to say, if you're inciting or engaging in harassment of others, you can be de-verified. You know how many times I've retweeted something that some dumbass says some horrifically silly shit at me, thinking they're making a good point, and I retweet it, and then people who follow me, who like me, argue with the guy and attack the guy. Isn't that what that is? You're inciting harassment. And what is harassment? That's such a broad fucking thing. When is it just fervent debate and disagreement? And when does it cross the line into harassment? So, this is just so fucking arbitrary. This is so goddamn arbitrary. And look, you're not, like, I know what Twitter thinks they're doing. They think what they're doing is being good people and saying, no, we don't want to give a platform to fucking Nazis. That's where they're coming from in their mind. They're saying, listen, we don't want to be accused of being part of the problem in the world where there's this rising tide of, like, white nationalism, ethno-nationalism, and there's hideous opinions that nobody would utter in the 1980s or 90s that now they're seemingly somewhat mainstream. We don't want to be a part of that. We don't want to bolster Richard Spencer. I mean, this is what they would argue. And I get where they're coming from. Everybody understands, any reasonable person understands that these are loathsome, hideous people. But the way they're going about it is honestly the equivalent of just shoving their head in the sand and saying, we're going to act like these people don't have big followings, and we're just going to, you know, summarily dismiss them as part of the dialogue, and then that'll make us feel better. But that's all you're doing is shoving your head in the sand and making yourself feel better. And again, if the original argument about verification was, no, it's just a matter of they are big enough to be impersonated, so this is the real person, full stop. If that's what verification was about, that didn't change. It doesn't matter how many times people argued with Twitter and said, no, I think you're endorsing that person. Your response can't be, no, we're not endorsing that person, but then at the same time saying, okay, now we're going to change the verification status because we're endorsing that person. No, then that's contradiction. Either you weren't endorsing that person, which, by the way, you weren't endorsing them. Again, you were just saying, hey, they're big enough to be impersonated, so that's why they have a check mark. Or you were endorsing that person. What you're doing is you're taking the people who strawmanned you, your worst critics, and you're saying, no, actually, you were right, and now we're going to kowtow to what you want us to do. I'm telling you, TikTok, people who you like who are not hateful are going to be de-verified. There's a decent chance I get de-verified. And look, this isn't the end of the world. Twitter's It's a fucking private company. They could do whatever they want, okay? They have every legal right to do this. Duh. But I'm just saying, it strikes me as a bad idea because it's so goddamn insular and silly. It's like when Huffington Post decided, hey, we're going to cover Donald Trump in the entertainment section because that's all this is a joke. And, hey, at first, I like that idea. I'm like, yeah, he is kind of a joke, so why not cover him in the entertainment section? But then guess what? He won the GOP nomination, and he won the presidency. And at some point along the way, Huffington Post was like, oh yeah, by the way, anyway, we're done covering him in entertainment and we're going to cover him and take him for real because it turns out he is for real, even though we wanted to pretend he wasn't. Exactly the point. These people, these fucking white nationalists and neo-Nazis and hateful people, they're real. They have followings, whether or not you want to acknowledge it. And by you de-verifying them and shoving your head in the sand, that's just you pretending they don't have big followings. And it also, man, it's weak. It gives into their fucking victim narrative. Like, the right-wingers have this deep victim narrative of, like, everybody's against us, which is why, like, Ben Shapiro and people are banned from college campuses from speaking. And listen, the right controls U.S. politics at the moment. They have the presidency, they have the Senate, they have the House of Representatives, they have the majority of state legislatures, they have the majority of governorships. The right controls everything. They're not victims. They are more victimizing people than they are victims. But when you do that, when you ban fucking speakers from college campuses, or when you want to de-verify people who are hateful, and then of course there's a gray area, and you're gonna fuck up sometimes and de-verify people who are not hateful, they could just be standard right-wingers, which is hateful enough, but not hateful enough to be de-verified. When you do that, you feed into their victim complex, and I think you make them stronger. I do. And Ken Klippenstein made a great point about this. I was talking to him about this, and he says, listen, it's so weird because liberals get the logic of freedom and liberty and having it all out in the open when it comes to drugs, for example. The idea is you don't want to like ban it and push it further underground, and then the black market has more problems associated with it, and there's more crime and all these problems because it's illegal. Liberals get that logic when it comes to drugs. That's why there are many liberal countries that do needle exchange programs, because they understand, hey, we hate it, but there are going to be some people in a society who do heroin. And if they are going to exist, then you might as well give them clean needles so they don't get fucking diseases and die. So we don't like that this exists, but we're going to deal with the reality of it, and we're going to treat it like a problem out in the open to be addressed. But somehow when it comes to speech, they take the opposite approach. And they're like, no, let's try to censor and ban and deplatform people who we disagree with, even ones who are legitimately hateful. That's not a good idea. I don't know what you're scared of. I don't. Yes, there are a lot of hateful people. Absolutely. But the idea that like, oh shit, we've saved the world from the scourge of Richard Spencer's checkmark. And as if like, hey, the more people hear him, obviously they will come all over themselves and start agreeing with what he says. The guy is a fucking idiot. I've done 1,000 videos ripping his arguments to shreds. It's not that hard. Even as when you look as far as fucking ISIS propaganda, the idea of like YouTube's like, oh, we must pull down these videos. Why? If somebody sees ISIS propaganda, they're going to be like, oh, I now totally agree with them. No, that's not going to fucking happen. So when you try to censor it, you push it more underground, you give it more of an edgy appeal to it, and then you're attracting a bigger audience to it. It's not a good idea for so many fucking reasons. It just is so... It strikes me as Jack sitting there all day, the CEO of Twitter, just like trying to make himself feel like a good person and coming up with silly solutions that are non-solutions. So, listen, not a good idea. You're going to have a lot of people who shouldn't be de-verified being de-verified. Even the most hateful people, it was never an endorsement of them in the first place. But you're taking your critics who strawmanned you and you're giving into their straw man. Because you're not that smart, Jack. You're just not. Sorry, but it's the truth. I mean, it's a goddamn shame when people who like to think of themselves as on the left like to go down this road of more censorship and more deplatforming and more, attacking a problem in a way that makes you look weak. I do not think left ideas are weak at all, which is why I want everything out in the open, and then I want to crush them. Because that's what'll happen. I will fucking crush them.